Okay, this is RJP Reacts. This is where I'm able to respond to the supporter crew of Darlie Routier. He doesn't allow us over on his page. I'm not comfortable going over there even if he does. They want to keep it specifically supporter only. So the only way that I can react to them is by re-recording his stuff and going through it point by point, which Rich does watch me do this. He doesn't comment very much under my videos at Reacting to Rich, but in this one, he's got a special guest. Her name is Sarah. I don't remember it completely. It's been about 4 years ago. It's Darlie Routier, episode 8 on RJP.
Good morning. I'm going to be your host today, Rich Prater, and I welcome and say good morning to all the Darlie supporters out there. It is 10 a.m. on the East Coast. It would be 9 a.m. on the West Coast. We have a very special guest coming in today that came highly recommended from somebody that I respect. And with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get Sarah in here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So let me go ahead and give her a call here, and we're going to get this show started. Okay.
Hello.
Hey, good morning, Sarah. We're live on the show here, and
Good morning.
yeah, how you doing this morning? Everything good?
I am doing good. I just got my children situated, and now I have some free time.
Fantastic. I got Bonnie here doing a sound test to make sure that all the sound sounds good. She just gave me a thumbs up from across the room, so I think we're in good shape to go ahead and get started. Sarah, I tell you what, if you could maybe give the viewers a bit of some information as far as how you got to know Darlie Lynn and why you're a supporter. I think that'd be a good way to get her started.
Okay, absolutely, and thanks for having me on.
Of course.
If you hear anything in the background, I am taking a walk because of the kids in the house.
Okay.
So excuse me for that. So I met Darlie when I saw The Last Defense, and that was in June of 2018. And I used to watch General Hospital forever and ever, and I was clean.
Okay, so it's not somebody that actually knows Darlie. She said she met Darlie after she or when she saw The Last Defense. All right, I thought it was somebody that actually knew Darlie. I'm interested in speaking to people who knew Darlie before her conviction. I mean, but anyways.
One day and had General Hospital playing in the background. I know it's corny, but they were advertising for this true crime show, and I was just starting to get into that stuff and watched Dateline and 48 Hours, and I said, oh, that looks interesting, something I'd want to watch. And when they were showing the videos of the boys and Darlie talking, I just got this familiar feeling like I've seen this before. And I set it up to record and watch it, and once I did, I realized that I had seen this coverage when I was a teenager on the news, and my mom was watching, I can't remember which talk show it was, but they were showing her first prison interview. And so I was probably 14, 15, and my mom was crying. And I said, what's happening? What is this? And she says, I can't believe they did this to this woman. And I said, what happened? And she said, they, told me the whole story of what happened. And I said, why would she do something like that? And she said, she wouldn't. And she said it was a husband or somebody obsessed with her or something. But
It's anybody but Darlie. It's starting out with anybody but Darlie.
a mother wouldn't do that to her children.
Mothers do that to their children. If you look at the statistics for spousal revenge, filicide, studies of Dr. Philip Resnick, you'll see that women do this, and it's quite more often than men.
And it just stuck with me. And then I went on with my teenage years and everything and had my kids, and here I am watching General Hospital, and there's Darlie 22 years later. And I watched these episodes, and I cried and cried, and finally, after the 4-part series was over, I reached out to her, and I just said, I will do anything I can for you, and I will fight for you, and anything I can do, I'm here for you. And that's it. We built a friendship that way.
And she's definitely an incredible lady. I can remember faintly when it all went down in June of '96. I was me and my ex-wife were living in Struthers, Ohio, and because it made national news media, obviously, and it's just one of them things that just popped on the news, and I was rather naive back in those days because me and Darlie Lynn are almost the same age.
Rather naive back in those days, Rich. We can talk about your naivety whenever you say, well, Darlie Lynn told me.
And you hear the press and the media say, well, she's guilty, she did this, she did that. You're like, okay, whatever, she did it, and you call it a day. And obviously many, many years went by, and then when I got involved in to investigating true crime, a good friend of mine had asked me to look at this case, and I'm like, I think I remember something about this, but not much, just faintly. And then I initially, when I first looked at it, I thought she was guilty as could be. And then once I started looking at the evidence and matching the evidence up to what Darlie Lynn had said happened, I seen that it matched identically. And I'm like, no, wait a minute, something isn't right. So I started digging more and more and more. And the more I started digging and the more information I started getting, the more I realized how innocent she really is. So I actually did a podcast not too long ago on crime scene photos and evidence. And I had a fella contact me from Canada. And he said, I thought for sure for a long time that, Darlie Lynn was guilty because, I was listening to the press and different various things. And he said, and once I seen you put up a case for her innocence, he goes, it's really changed my mind quite a bit.
I get a lot of that too over the years. People will tell me, I'm watching what you do, and I used to be a supporter. You'll get that on both sides. I've had attorneys call me. I had one attorney, he was working on the Rodney Reed case. He picked my brain about the Darlie case. He felt like she was innocent, and we talked for quite a while. He said, you'd be a good litigator. His name was Quincy something or other. I can't remember his name. It's so many years ago. But I have single-handedly, by people listening to what I put out there, that changed their mind as well.
And he actually would like to eventually be a guest on the show here to discuss that. And I really want to have him on here eventually. But anyway, I wanted to point out to the folks this morning that a good friend of mine had recommended me to get in touch with Sarah to see if I could get her on the show, and also for any other information that I could get on the case. And when doing so, Sarah brought up something very interesting to me that somehow or other I passed over, which is I'm actually almost embarrassed about it, but I have to admit it. And when me and Sarah were actually talking on the phone, we were talking about the Routier neighborhood. And I was telling Sarah that, I don't think that neighborhood's very easy to get in or out of. And she's like, well, wait a minute, don't forget, about, that parking lot behind Karen Neal's house. I'm thinking to myself, well, wait.
Okay, let's take a look. He's speaking on Karen Neal's house, which is right here. So I'm going to take us behind that and show you what he's talking about. We also have to remember that according to the testimony between William Gorsuch, when he heard noises, he's looking out his window and watching Waddell pull up from this window. He's watching Waddell pull up. So let's go around back. This is the back of Nelda Watts' home. She's the one that saw Darlie and Darren having fun with the memorials. You can see that it's sealed off to get through there. Let's see if Karen's the same way. There's also a fence right through here. Karen Neal's house. Got a nice backyard there. You can see that it's fenced off. I'm assuming that fence has been there. It should have been. Let's talk about this parking lot area right here. There's several ways that he could get through there. This is Gorsuch's house. A little sideway that you can get through if you wanted to. Let's see how many different ways there is to get through here. Sideway to get through here. So there are ways to get through there to this parking lot. Again, here's the back that he's talking about. He's talking about this parking lot back here. Let's take a look. So it's the top view of it. Now, what he's going to talk about is someone coming out and going through this parking lot area here. Once you get over to this parking lot area here, the police were coming from this way. The Darlock Fire Department were coming from this way up Darlock. So he's talking about this parking lot right here. You can get through right here, starting right here, but you couldn't get through any of these three. But starting on where Gorsuch's house is, which is right here, you can get through here, you get through here, and you can get through here. So that would mean someone would have to come directly this way. Boom. All right, but that's Gorsuch's house, and you had two people looking out the window. His wife was also looking out the window, but she didn't testify. Let's see here.
Wait a minute, what did I miss here? But if I tell you what, I'm gonna go ahead and put some photos up here. Sarah, I actually Googled Earth, took some pictures. I think I told you that earlier this morning, and I wanted to actually show people a little bit about what you were talking about, and maybe have you explain it in a little more detail, because this definitely, you're definitely right. You're definitely right on that aspect. And I think it's important for people to see this.
It was there.
Yes. Now, this first photo, I don't know if you can see what I'm showing on here, Sarah. I remember you were saying you were on a walk.
I'm outside.
Okay.
Step out. So.
Okay. Well, on this first photo here, and I'll explain this to the folks here, and hopefully you'll probably know what I'm talking about, Sarah, because I know you spent some time in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I walked back.
I'm interested to see if he speaks about Gorsuch while he's explaining this. I kind of remember this, and I know that Rich went back here and drove back through this alley. When I went there, I didn't. I went to this. I didn't go back that way at all. It wasn't even considered back then. But if you see this manhole right here, Gorsuch said he parks his truck right in front of the house right there. And then there's a light there, and there's a light over in this area somewhere too. So in order to get back through there, you can't use these three. And it looks like you can't use to get through. It looks like you would have to start by here or here to get through.
I walked back there, so I've got. I mean, it's been a year, but I remember.
Okay, so on this first picture here, you see where Darlie Lynn lived, which is at 5801 Eagle Drive, and you can see the cul-de-sac, and right directly across the street to the right of the picture, on the picture, I should say, is where Karen Neal's house was. Now behind there is an alleyway, okay, which I've never gone up that alleyway, but I'm about to here fairly soon.
Let's do that.
So let me explore this picture a little bit more on the next slide here. You can still see where 5801 Eagle Drive is. You can also see where the alleyway is. And now all of a sudden we're running into a big vacant parking lot. And sir, I have to tell you, when I was looking at this on Google Earth, I was in a state of shock. I have no idea how I could have passed this up. I swear that I went through every square inch up there, but evidently I miserably failed at that.
Well, let me say something though, because with the walkarounds that I did, you know, I did walk through the yards. There are no fences. You know, not everybody has a security fence. So, and that house was not, and you just walk right through. So and I did, but you really do have to go and explore. It's not something. I've been there 2 other times and never knew it was there. And then before I went last June, somebody on one of the support sites from another country, I can't remember who this person was, but we were talking about all the
Probably speaking about Heidi Elizabeth Moan.
exit ways out of the neighborhood and how there's no fences and that they could just duck and dodge and be on another street in no time. And this woman said, don't forget about that vacant lot 100 feet from Darlie's driveway. And I said, what?
Yeah.
And she said, yes. And then she sent me the Google Earth of it. And I said, and I was like you, in a state of shock.
Yeah.
So when I went back in June last year, I went straight to it. I couldn't get there fast enough to go see what this thing was. And it honestly looks like, from what I've heard, is that it was possibly like a church, preschool type thing.
Yeah, it's definitely there, and I'm going to look at it. Now, you were talking about the fences. Now, you know I live in Dallas. I live about 20, 25 minutes away from where Darlie Lynn lived at. So I frequent that area. And what I can tell you under Texas state law, first of all, people in Texas are fence crazy. Everybody has a fence, it seems. And the same is true in that neighborhood. But under Texas state law, every third house has to have a walkthrough. And I'd like to also point out, one of the walkthroughs by Darlie Lynn's house is right where the sock was found by the trash receptacle and the storm sewer, which you know where that's at. There's a walkthrough right in between.
That would disqualify what you're speaking on here, because that would mean that your intruder would have went the other way instead of, like I said, he can only get through right here. It starts right here. All right, then 1, 2, 3. Karen Neal has a fence up. I don't think they want to climb a fence to get to that.
House is there. So you had access from the front to the back and vice versa, obviously. So that was another thing I wanted to point out. Now, I'm also going to put another photo up. This is a bigger shot of that parking lot that goes back behind Karen Neal's house in the alleyway that me and Sarah are talking about. And another thing I found interesting here, folks, if you look to the right of the photograph, you can see a clear access to Dull Rock Road. Mind you, Dull Rock Road is the road that you turn in off of to get to Darlie Lynn's former development area. You can go in on Linda Vista, Willowbrook, and you could even come in here. And it clearly shows that here on the picture here. So yeah, this is really interesting stuff here, Sarah, because you and I both know that there was an intruder, and I've always tried to figure out their possible escape route. And this definitely does raise some eyebrows. That's for sure.
Yeah, it really shows that somebody could have easily just.
Well, I wonder if they want to show how the intruder would have made it through there. I wonder if they talk about that, because you cannot discount Gorsuch. He had no reason to tell any type of lie about this case. He didn't have a vendetta against them. You know, you cannot, but there is a little walkway through the side of his house, but they would have to go right under him to get through there. The rest of them do not have walkways. Now, what he's talking about is this walkway right here where the sock would have been found, right here. There's a garden. This is Guzman's house, but that sock was found right there. But there is a walkway there. But can't discount Gorsuch, though. You just can't do it. He had no reason to lie. None.
Just got away.
Yeah, it's quite possible. It is quite possible. I mean, and yeah, they not only could.
My concern, though, with all that is never once in this case is that brought up.
No.
I've never heard it before.
No, never. The only thing that you ever hear brought up in the case is that the neighborhood was very hard to get in and out of. That's about the only thing they'll discuss about that.
And we just proved that's not true.
Right. And these pictures speak a million words.
Well, you haven't really proven anything. You haven't proven anything because you're not saying how they did it.
Let me ask you, sir. I mean, there are some people that are asking some questions. Are you up to answering any questions that people might have?
Yeah, it depends on what the question is.
Well, right. No, the folks that come into my room, most of them are really respectful people. They know that I won't stand for disrespect. They'll be gone in a second. But my gosh, I don't even know where to start here. There's been a list of questions going here. I tell you what, let's try to do this fairly, folks. If we could start, if somebody wants to post a question for Sarah here, and I can let Sarah know what it says, and we'll take it from there. Very good question. Harmony Sky asks, Sarah. Well, she actually was asking somebody in the group this, but we'll ask you this because we've actually talked a little bit about the Darlene Potter situation. Actually, there wasn't a question. Okay. Now, yeah, I'm sorry. There's so many.
Okay.
There's so many coming up here. Somebody's asking, how was Glenn Mize eliminated as a suspect?
Mize was eliminated as a suspect. For one, he didn't match her description. That Glenn Mize is the gentleman that they walked into the courtroom, and you could immediately see that he didn't look anything like what Darlie described. Much taller, much bigger. They brought him inside the courtroom when Darlie was on the stand.
I'm sorry. What was the name?
The name of the person is Bathsheba, and I'm assuming it's a she. And she asks, how was Glenn Mize eliminated as a suspect?
Yeah, I'm not answering that one.
I'm not going to answer that one either. Yeah.
Because you can't. I'm glad that you didn't touch on that one. Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one because I can't.
And you got to remember, folks.
Darlene Potter, though.
Yeah.
Potter, I could talk a little about that one because that S curve.
Yeah, the S curve on Dull Rock Road, right?
That's what I'd love for you to do is to trace it back to the parking lot and just see what. That's what I didn't get to do when I was there in last June because I was so busy. Was to just really investigate that more.
Well, I tell you, I know right where this curve is. I've been there many times, and not only visits to that neighborhood, but I do a lot of work down there, and so I'm very familiar with Dull Rock Road. I know right where that's at, and yes, that S curve would be fairly close to where that parking lot exits out on Dull Rock Road. It's not far at all.
So now, Glenn Mize lived in the neighborhood. I'm not sure exactly which house it was. 5-6 houses away from Darlie, I believe. Glenn Mize lived in the neighborhood. So if you wanted to accuse Glenn Mize, right, you have to take out the black car theory stalking the house. It's because if Glenn Mize lived in the neighborhood and he had something against Darlie, he wouldn't have to drive his car past her house. He could just walk. He lives in a neighborhood. He can just walk and look. He can even go up and down the alley. And he wouldn't look suspicious because he lived in the neighborhood. So you'd have to take the black car out.
So, but you got to understand, folks, there's some questions we don't want to answer.
There's some questions you can't answer. What do you mean you don't want to answer it? You're here to show everybody else how innocent Darlie is. But you got things you don't want to answer? That makes no sense. You know, Glenn Mize is going to be Glenn Mize no matter you answer the question or not. He's not going to not become a suspect any longer in your eyes just because you answered a question. The facts don't go away. You say that a lot. You say, well, I can't say right now, but there's some things going on, but I can't. Them things are going to still remain the same no matter you speak about them or not. Just because you say, well, they're looking into so-and-so down here, that's not going to go away. Like, well, the police ain't going to go, well, we can't look at that because Rich mentioned it.
Because in no way, shape, or form do myself or Sarah want to jeopardize Darlie Lynn's case. So there's things we know, we just don't want to put it out there because it could possibly cause problems in the case. I'm
convenient. How convenient for you, Rich. Is this how you want people to support Darlie? Because you've got a whole lot of speculation and a whole lot of, well, I just can't say. We used to hear that a lot from the member, the Free Darlie administrator, David Moffat. And what he would say is, well, we know this and we know that, but I'm not at liberty to say. Now it's switched to just flat out, we can't talk about it. We've heard all of this before you were even around, Rich. Well, I just can't say. What you can't say is she's innocent and why. And you still haven't shown how this person would have got to this alley.
sure you folks understand that. You're just as, you want answers just as much as we do, clearly. But unfortunately, patience is something you have to have here. Let's see here if we can get. I wish I could get some people ask some more questions here. But if you want to talk about the Darlene Potter situation, Sarah, go right on ahead.
Oh no, I just don't feel like anything was ever truly investigated fully, and the parking lot for me sealed the deal with. I just don't feel like anything was ever truly investigated fully, and the parking lot for me sealed the deal with.
Like I said, you still haven't told how they got over to that parking lot. And they're going to talk about Darlene Potter here in just a second. If they got over to the parking lot, you would assume that they had a car. So that would discount 2 people walking. One with no shoes on.
With her story matching up to the event. Also, if Angelia Rickles, I think I said her name right, the woman that lived in the neighborhood, her house was also attempted to be broken into that night. That is not just a short few minute walk.
Yeah,
She lived on Miami Street, which was a couple blocks away. And Angelina Mary Rickles was watching a horror movie with her 15-year-old daughter, and she said two men came to her front door and were jiggling the door, and she turned on the light and they went away. And then she said they sat back down to watch the movie some more and heard somebody messing with her window, and she looked out and saw two men, one wearing a cowboy type hat, and that they just went away, and she didn't call the police. But Toby Shook on the stand, he mentioned that they were watching a horror movie, and sometimes when you watch a horror movie, your mind plays tricks with you. She was also on trazodone. Mary Rickles had a whole bunch of health problems. We don't know. She didn't mention this until 6 days after the Routier event occurred, and it didn't scare her enough to call the police. Like I said, she turned on the light and the people went away. She said that the police came out, they talked to her, and that while they were talking to her, they went over to her house next door and actually arrested someone for something else.
it
Could have been the same people. I don't know how it would be related, but
I actually did look at that. I've been to the Rickles house on Miami Drive, and I checked it on Apple Maps, and it's exactly 2/10 of a mile from Darlie Lynn's house, which is extremely close.
That's not extremely close. I mean, it's close, but extremely close would be Karen Neal's house.
So I mean, it's literally a hop, skip, and a jump. Yeah,
I'll give them this. It's odd that Mary Rickles' house sits in a half a cul-de-sac. It does sit in a half a cul-de-sac.
it's literally right. Yeah, it's literally a hop across Dull Rock Road, really.
Yep, you walk right out of the neighborhood there, and you go across Dull Rock Road. And I mean, we were on foot, and we were there it was less than 5 minutes, and we had to cross the main street there. So
right. Yeah, it's very interesting, and you're right. There's a lot.
This is her house that they're talking about right here. She said two men came to this door right here. She flipped on the light, and they went away. Then she said that they went around to the side window right here, and that she looked out the window, saw the two men, and that they just went away. The police did come over there. There's an interview of her with Joe Munoz, and you can see her walking through here and talking about what happened. But she didn't mention it for 6 days later. She did have a lot of drug problems. She's no longer a nurse, so I don't know what to make of it. But it didn't scare her enough to call the police that night.
Very good leads were taken to Detective Patterson, in which, you know, he'd write the leads on paper, and to my understanding, he'd just crinkle them up and throw them in a trash can. So,
Where do you come up with that? To your understanding, he just crinkle them up and throw them in a trash can. Where is there any validity to that story? You just put things out there without explaining them. He is the police officer, not you.
he wouldn't even have the thought of entertaining any other possibilities, which that's poor investigative work. Very, very poor investigative work.
It's like you saying, well, to my knowledge, he just crumbled them up and threw them away. That's poor investigative work, right? Now, if you say, well, so and so, Joe Smith, brought Detective Patterson this huge lead, and here's what the lead is. And Mr. Patterson just took that huge lead and he tore it up and threw it in a trash can, and so saw him do that. That's good investigative work. You do speculative work. Speculative. It's to my understanding. To your understanding, Darlie's innocent. Just let that sink in for a minute.
Especially when you have two murdered children and an attempted murder of an adult. So that just goes to show what kind of people really investigated the case.
This goes to show what kind of people really think that Darlie's innocent. Because you didn't give any proof that Detective Patterson did that. You said, to my understanding. That's your proof. It goes to show what kind of people support Darlie Routier is you have to speculate. You cannot come back with bare facts. You still haven't told how they got over to this parking lot, and we're 35 minutes, 19 minutes in.
Very, very poor work.
Yeah, I'd be interested to talk to the actual first responders.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's really what when all this breaks out, I'm curious to see what they had to say, what they were told to do, regarding notes being taken. I know Waddell said that he was told not to take any notes.
Yeah.
Waddell didn't have. Waddell made a report later on. Okay, but if Waddell is in the house, he gets there in the house. First of all, he brings Darren in at gunpoint, which I believe that. All right, he gets in the house. He sees his two dead kids or dying kids. She's saying that there's an intruder that went out the garage. What's he supposed to do? Well, there's two children written right here. She's standing by the end of the bar. I'm going to go out to the garage. Now, he can't be writing notes at that point. He can later, though.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's true, too. I think they were actually instructed not to investigate any other possible leads for reasons that we've talked about in private. But
well, you talk about reasons they talk about in private. You got all this hush hush stuff, right? Why did they canvass the entire neighborhood? Because you were talking about that in another podcast. Our Greg Davis and them canvassed the entire neighborhood looking for bad news about Darlie. Why would they even canvass if they weren't looking anywhere else?
um,
Why would they even listen to Mary Rickles or Darlene Potter?
okay, so I got a question here from Donna D. Her question is, why do you think Basia turned on her kind and caring friend like she did?
Asha did not turn on her kind and caring friend. She did not. She told the truth as she was subpoenaed as someone that was in the house. She did not turn on her. This is on the hub pages. It's written about, you can tell they're talking about me, but they don't put my name out there. It's about Basia Jovell. And it says, I believe Darren was being untruthful when he stated that he only signed the affidavit because her lawyers put it in front of me and told me just sign it. He said that on the last defense. And he said, I did it for Darlie. I believe Darren most definitely had every intention of following through with this plan. Money was tight. And Darren had done almost the exact same thing back in 1993 with his Jaguar. Okay, this is what Basia told me. I wish the video was still out there. There's not one but two Jaguars. And that in 1993, Darren actually had one stolen. She told me that she didn't say Oklahoma like this. She told me it was in Hamilton, Ohio. And she told me that Darlie knew all about it. Okay, so I don't know what to make of these scam things when it comes back to talking to Basia like I did. A certain YouTuber has been very vocal over the years regarding his opinion of Darlie's guilt, uploaded a rather interesting video several years back. It was an hour-long phone call to a woman named Basia Jovell, who had once been a very close friend of Darlie's, but ended up testifying against her at trial. Now, she had to. She was summoned. And I asked her why she didn't say some of these things that she was telling me over the phone. Why didn't you say this at trial? She said because she didn't want to volunteer any information. She said, I wanted to answer what they asked me, and that's it. She still had love for Darlie. Even though she felt like Darlie did it, she still had love for Darlie. Jovell verified that in 1985, Darren did indeed arrange to have his, or 93, his Jaguar stolen. See, that was the second Jaguar he had, the one that they keep talking about. A lot of people don't know he had two of them. And the car was kept in property. I don't know why they wrote Oklahoma, because she told me Hamilton, Ohio. While Darren was rewarded with a check from the insurance company. Now, do you think that Darlie wouldn't know about that? Aside from the 1993 scam, Jovell also verified that there was a plan in the works in the late spring and early summer of 1996. The Routier family had plane tickets to fly out to Altoona, PA, for Darlie's grandparents' golden anniversary, which they did. They did. They already had the plane tickets when these crime was committed. Jovell claimed that while they were away, she was supposed to come in and feed the animals, water the plants, bring in the mail, eat, and Darren would discover the burglary and be the one that phoned the police while he was conveniently out of the state. Jovell, wanting nothing to do with this plan, refused. Now, I'm going to tell you what Basia told me, and it throws me off a bit. She told me that she did say all this. She said that her and Darlie, Darren and Darlie, wanted her to be involved in that, and that she said no. She said Darlie knew all about it. And it does throw me off. It throws me off quite a bit, actually, the more I think about it. But she did. All the people that heard that interview said, they said that Darlie knew about it. She said that. But she also told me, again, if we're going to believe everything that Basia says, we have to believe everything that Basia says. She told me they'd been fighting for a week, that Darlie was sleeping on a couch, that they were having marital problems, and that the reason she was down on the couch is because she, quote, cut Darren off. Not because of a baby making noise. But she told me she came over there that night, early that day of the murders, and that Darren and Darlie were in the kitchen screaming and hollering at each other. And that, so she stepped out back. She went out the sliding glass doors that are behind the couch. And Damon was back there playing with a stick. And she told me that Damon came up to her and asked, could he spend the night with her? Can I spend the night with you, Miss Basia? And she was kneeled down and was explaining to him, I have to work in the morning. I don't know why you'd want to spend the night with me. And she said, Damon looked up at her and said, because mommy's being mean to me. So if we believe everything that Basia has to say, then we'd have to believe this too. But Basia did not turn on her. When you get a subpoena to sit in a courtroom, you are bound to tell the truth. And Basia did not offer any information. She only answered what she was asked. Period.
Well, I don't know Basia, but from, just talking with Darlie or talking with supporters, I think that the investigators can really twist your words around and make you say things. And I think she loves those boys. I don't think she would ever want any harm to come to that family.
That's the truth, because Basia cried mostly when I mentioned Devin and Damon. She would start crying. And this was 20 years after the murders. She would start crying. This interview was, I think it was in 2013. And she would start crying about Devin and Damon. She loved them. And that's why she told me, she turned down so many different interviews. People wanted to talk to her. And I had talked to her a couple different times before she actually let me. There was actually 2 interviews with her. And she told me that she felt like since I was doing it for Devin and Damon, that she would talk to me. She even turned down David Chase.
But, we don't know what kind of relationship her and Darlie had. don't know.
They had a pretty decent relationship because, even at the funeral or at the graveside, the silly string, that's Basia you see holding Drake with his little arms up. Basia was the matron of honor at her wedding. Basia and Helena both, and Tammy, Basia's daughter, Tammy, are mentioned in Darlie's will, 10,000 apiece. So I don't know what the fallout was. They always say there's a fallout between them. There was none. And Rich is probably going to go on and say, she was jealous of her. If you're jealous of somebody, you don't work for them. You don't take care of their kids. You don't do that.
No, nobody knows except for Darlie and people that were close to them at that time. So we can only speculate why she would have done that.
Well,
the fallout happened after Basia got on the stand, and Darlie had a problem with her after that.
That's true. I don't know Basia either, but I have heard many interviews she has given, and
not many. The only people who got interviews with her was me, and there was only 2. Not many.
I'm in question to a lot of what she says because some of it just don't make any sense. But
see, if something rings points towards Darlie, to them it doesn't make any sense. That's their only. It just doesn't make any sense. That's absolutely ridiculous.
On the other hand, I think some of the things she says is accurate. But
yeah, you can't pick and choose it though. You see, either she's a crazed, mentally ill, drug addicted person that hated Darlie, or she's not. You can't pick and choose it.
But again, it's just like you said. I think the best way to look at it, and this is my opinion as an investigator, is
shit. You're somebody that looks at true crime. You're not a fucking investigator, Rich. You need to take that little fantasy land out of there, buddy.
You can look at what she says under oath, and then you can look at what she says when she's not under oath. And believe me,
there are 2 different things. But so's Darlie's. So's Darren's. I asked her specifically why she didn't say this stuff on the stand, and her answer was quick and sharp to me. She said, I only answered what they asked me. And see, so I'm in this interview asking her all kinds of different questions. I'm asking her questions she wasn't asked on the stand. Basia didn't want to make it any worse for Darlie than it already was, in my opinion.
they're 2 different things. Clearly, 2 different things. And the same thing with her mother, Helena, as well. They were clear.
Yeah, the same thing with Darlie Key, her mother. They're not clearly 2 different things. And the jury didn't get to hear about Drake being held tightly in that blanket the day of. They didn't get to hear about that because the judge ruled that it wasn't similar to the crime, so the jury didn't get to hear that.
Clearly 2 different things. I mean, some of the things that Helena said about Darlie Lynn was just downright criminal in comparison to what she testified to in court.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not just that, anything that Basia really says, she's got no way to confirm what she said had occurred. It's really hearsay anyway.
Well, see, Rich, now it's convenient for you to talk about someone else's hearsay when you're a person who constantly tells us, well, I can't say right now. I'm not at liberty to tell. Someone told me this. I can't talk about it. It's real convenient for you to mention Basia's hearsay, right? Think about these things, Rich.
Right.
So it's really hard to say, but you also have to understand that Basia Jovell's also had a history of psychiatric issues and
Darlie Key.
addiction issues as well.
So has Darren. And maybe Darlie. But Darlie didn't have any drugs in her system that night. She could have been a casual user. But if you want to listen to Ben Clayborg talk about it, they did coke and smoked weed together.
which she openly admits to. So I give her credit to that.
Well, on the stand, when Basia found that Darlie was contemplating suicide, she was writing in about suicide, just wanted to end it all and just confiding in her. Basia became very concerned because she too was at a situation where she wanted to attempt suicide. So she knew what that felt like. And she wanted to talk to her friend about how to work your way out of that. That's the only mental thing that I know of. And Rich says that she's been in and out of psychiatric care and all that. She doesn't say anything about that on the stand.
But on the other hand, that also has to be taken a look at as well.
Well, there's a long history there too. She had been around before, I believe, before they were married.
Yep, she met them in 1987. She had already worked at Cuplex for 14 years when Darren got hired on. And when Darren wanted to shift out into his own business, she helped him. She helped him. They worked out of their apartment and they worked out of their home. Basia helped Darren move up.
Yeah.
Before Darlie and Darren were married. And so, again, we don't know what kind of relationship these people had together for her to turn on her and say things.
She didn't turn on her. Why do you guys say that?
Like that.
Well, I mean, it couldn't have been that bad because I mean, all the way up to the end. I mean, Basia worked for Darren. Basia's mother, worked as a housekeeper in the house. It couldn't have been that bad of a relationship like they.
Means Basia couldn't have been that bad of a person, right, Rich? There couldn't have been that bad of a fallout, right? The fallout happened as soon as Basia put her ass on that stand, and the fallout was Darlie's fallout.
Claimed it was, or why would they have done that? Why would why would Basia keep working for Darren? Why were they always at the house? Helena was at the house doing laundry, so on and so forth. So if the
Helena only worked for them for a couple days.
Relationship was that bad, or Darlie Lynn was that bad, I mean, they could have left, but they didn't.
Right.
So, right, and if Basia was that bad and she was such a psychiatric person with drug addiction problems, they could have told her to stay out of their house, right? Can't have it both ways, Rich.
That's another thing to look at.
And if anybody would have seen, anything odd with Darlie being a mother, they would have said something.
Well, I mean,
there's no reports of her being anything but a loving, caring mother.
Yeah.
And those reports come mostly from the family. Even Basia said that Darlie was good with the kids. There's people in the chat going, "Oh, she's manic depressive, blah blah blah."
Yeah, it clearly points that way. I've actually talked to somebody who is one of Devin and Damon's friends that used to frequent the house. Of course, at the time, he was almost 7 years old, so he was about the same age that Devin was at the time.
He's talking about Gorsuch's son, Jonathan, who was 6.5 years old at the time.
He had nothing but good to say about Darlie Lynn. He said they loved going over there. And then after the tragedy occurred, he said he couldn't even as much as ride his bike in the neighborhood. He said when he was in the car with his folks, he said if they were going by the house, something, he'd duck his head down between his legs. He's scared to death to even look at the house. So
a killing happened in there.
It kind of got me thinking a little further too. Not only were there families that were extremely uprooted due to this, but it also affected a lot of the children in the neighborhood. And I guess you can say I never really gave that a whole lot of thought until after I actually talked to one of the children that used to frequent that house. And even today, with him being in his 30s, he still don't like talking about it. I mean, he was clearly uncomfortable when
Yeah, and there's another podcast where he talks about speaking with him, and he kept on saying he was clearly uncomfortable, But Rich kept pressing him. In an interview, if you're talking to someone and they express discomfort to you about something, you either end that interview or you talk about something else. You kept saying he was clearly uncomfortable. It's because you were making him uncomfortable by bringing it up, Rich.
He told me, he said, you're really going to make me, bring one of the worst chapters of my life, back to the light again. I'm like,
And Rich is like, yeah, I'm gonna let you. Okay, yeah, because Darlie's innocent. Yeah, go ahead, tell me. I don't care how you feel.
well, I'm sorry. I had no intention of doing that, but he talked to me though, but he was very reluctant, due to what it had done.
It is. It's very heartbreaking. And when I first found out she was still in there, that my children were just 4 and 6.
Yeah.
It really hit hard about, I just sat there and thought, this could be me. This could be any one of my friends. What if this happened to my best friend? What if,
Well, I tell you, if a man breaks into your house and slices your throat and kills your 2 kids in front of you, I'll tell you how it won't happen to you. 1, you get your ass down there and help your kids. That's the first thing. 2, quit changing your stories up. 3, don't be surprised when they take your sink and change your story up. 4, don't be at the graveside spraying silly string over their bodies. 5, after that, don't give an interview and talk about how gossip is the most evil thing in the world standing next to your fresh grave of your kids. Period. That's how it won't happen to you.
Darlie testified about the baby making noise in the crib, and that's why she was sleeping downstairs.
That's a damn lie. Believe it. If you really look at that situation, the reason that she was down the stairs, because the baby was making noise, right? Lots of babies make noises in their cribs. Lots of mothers get woken up by that. Very few of them choose to sleep in a whole different ass part of the house because of it. Fucking kid, I can't even sleep. I don't even want to be close to my husband. I don't want to find out why this kid's rooting and grunting. I don't want to find out about it. Just fuck it. I'll go sleep on the other. Just fuck it. Just think about that. She's such a light sleeper that would wake her up. But she didn't wake up during that. That's a big part of her lie. 2 kids being murdered right there. A guy sneaking in her house. She didn't hear that?
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert on the transcripts, so don't quote me on any of this. But I know that she had said she was sleeping downstairs because the baby was noisy in his crib. And I know that. I had 2 kids, and they slept next to me for 5, 6 months, 7 months, and they were noisy. I used to have to sleep with earplugs because they grunt in their sleep, and they roll around, and they're noisy.
Notice how this young lady stated that she had to put earplugs in her ears. Not that she went to a whole different ass part of the house and left the baby to grunt and root by itself. Not without mama.
And so people bashed her about that. And that's something that is just totally rings true to any new mother that co-sleeps with the kid in the room. That always bothered me.
Yeah.
Simple things like that where people just assassinated her character and made little things into mountains.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought the character assassination up. Definitely a very serious problem in this case. What I don't understand out of people.
Are you kidding me? You just character assassinated Basia.
Okay, especially the prosecution, even the press back at that time. Now, of course, keep in mind, I live here in Texas. I'm not initially from Texas, but I live here, and I do know it's extremely conservative. And in '96, it was even more so. Now, I don't see a thing in the world wrong with any lady that wants to make herself look good.
No, neither. But no, I don't believe that the way she looked and her breast implants and the look at me had anything to do with the crime. I really don't.
Whether it be by wearing, expensive clothes. I know she had the breast enlargement. That was a big thing that got brought up in the case. So what? That's her right to do that. That certainly does not make somebody a murderer.
She also has 3 children, and
Yeah.
as any woman would testify, after having 3 children, and your husband is, able to provide stuff like that for you, why not?
Sure, why not?
Especially, and then rumor has it through the books and stuff. This is only a rumor, but the book said that Darlie became pregnant again, and in order for her to agree to an abortion, Darren would buy her the breast implants.
That's your right to do that. And
right. And in the 90s, I was a teenager, but that is what I wanted to be and, look like. I wanted to have, I had the jewelry on my fingers. That's what it was back then. And I lived in California, and then now I'm in Arizona, and again, we're in a conservative state, but I also live in Scottsdale, and I'm around all that stuff. So none of that is new, even in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, to me that character assassination aspect is ridiculous. The press.
You do it all the time, Rich. You do it all the time. You character assassinate the law enforcement. They were just stupid. James Cron, Tom Bevel. You character assassinate everybody on the opposing end of this case. Every single one of them. Haters, circle of hell people. You think it's ridiculous? All right, so I'm going to end this right here. I don't like to do these for too long. Maybe I'll go back and do the second parts of these because people aren't interested in a long video. The average view time that I get on these that go over 100 minutes is about 20 minutes. But I just wanted to go through his stuff there. Happy New Year, y'all. And in this video, I'm gonna run through it. But they never talked about how that person would get from Eagle Drive, from her house on Eagle Drive back to this plat. They never talked about it. Never. And they didn't mention Gorsuch. They couldn't. Because if somebody came out of the front of that house, he would have heard it. He would have saw it.